What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Alchemy Podcast, here with a dear friend who not only do we have cross-references in the workspace in door-to-door, but also on kind of a mindset and belief system. I'm here with Tyler Bastian, founder, CEO, Vital Solar.
Vital Power.
Vital Power, right? It's been really cool. I work with a lot of Vital guys in Alchemy, so it's been cool to kind of see from a distance what you guys have been creating. And it feels like you guys have a lot of momentum right now.
Yeah, man. Things are, our industry is ridiculous. So there's always a lot of challenges and makes it exciting. It's up and down for the space from a financial standpoint and, a lot of movement, but yeah, a lot of momentum as well. It's a lot of fun right now. It's been a lot of growth over the past year and so with growth comes a lot of challenges too. So
the only constant in this industry is change.
Exactly.
Right.
This has been a year full of that. What year's not?
And it seems like not only has it been a big year of change professionally, but it feels like you've gone through a lot of change personally as well.
Yeah, man. The last 3 years. The last 3 years have been a really big just shift in life, shift in perspective, shift in just the way I think about a lot of things. There's been a lot of change, man. A lot of change.
If Tyler 3 years ago saw Tyler today, what do you think he would think?
If you rewind 3 years ago, if you rewind 5 years ago, I don't even recognize myself. And that's such a good thing, But I also could not have predicted so many different things, both business, both personal. Like it's just a drastic shift. It's like you drop a bomb off in every box that I was living in, like the work boxes I was living in, the belief boxes from so many things of how I used to think growing up, or the religion I was raised in, or just even the personal boxes I operated in. It's like I started just an entire new life, and it's very it's just wild. It's refreshing. It's incredible. It's been hard. It's a really cool experience, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I think we reconnected over is we went through similar experiences. Obviously, growing up, you were raised in Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So raised in Utah, Mormon
Davis
thing,
County.
Davis County, right? Up in Salt Lake County, Mormon thing. Kind of this is what you're supposed to do. We both kind of did door to door.
Yep.
This is kind of the path, and then we shake the box. And
the box got shaken for sure.
Well, I always tell people, it was so hard. 2017, 2018 was so tough for me because I don't know if you can relate to this, because I left Mormonism and I left Vivint the same year. Yeah. So it's like your identity's so wrapped up into this is who I am and this is what I'm supposed to do, and then the rug gets pulled. And so it seems like you went through a similar process yourself.
Very, very similar. Yeah. I kind of exited in a very short period of time. Went from being in the security industry for 10 years, jumped into solar, and then there's kind of like a...
What year did you go to solar?
2015.
15. So you're actually early.
Yeah, I did.
In comparison, you're early.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your comparison, right? Like at the time, I felt like I was so late to the game. Like it was over, But I did security from 2005 to 2015 is the security days. 2015 jumped to solar, but I'm there for a year and a half, and then things get real weird when Tesla buys Solar City. I end up back.
So you went to Solar City.
Ended up back at Vivint in right at the beginning of 2017 to launch into the retail stores. I oversaw or helped oversee the retail launch that Vivint did.
Was the Best Buy thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very short-lived.
I feel like that crashed and burned.
Retail was not for me. I got hired and fired very quickly. That was an ego hit too. And it was on one end, I could have cared less because it's like, but I got fired. Yeah. And that was an interesting experience. For the ego.
So you went from Solar City. I remember the Best Buy thing sucked. Like I remember
It was a lot, man.
I remember they were pushing everyone to go do Best Buy. Oh, I have all these like old memories just flooded in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you the story about my Best Buy experience.
You went during the holidays. They pushed you in the holidays, right?
I went December 2017. That was the year 2017. I went out to Washington, D.C. I walked into the Best Buy, to the booth. I was there for 90 minutes, and I left, and I never went back.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to sit here.
It was
awful.
Dude, I think so many people had the perspective, I know we're bouncing around, but I think so many people had the perspective that was going to be like, oh, you're in a store, this is easy. No, it was
harder. Way harder.
Without question. Now for somebody who's never done door to door, maybe they wouldn't perceive it that way. But if you had, like you don't have somebody's like attention in their place. They came in to grab like a phone charger for 15 minutes and like leave, right? Like, so you're not in their place where they normally make decisions. They weren't planning on that. Half the time they're not with a spouse, and you're trying to like check them out of the store, cash right on spot. Like, it was a challenge, but yeah, do the security thing, jump into solar, go back to that. But I love solar. So the retail thing was very short-lived for a variety of reasons. And then when I transitioned out of that, I got right back into solar.
What was that transition out of the retail piece? What was that like?
The transition out?
Yeah, like how long were you actually in it?
9 months.
So it's pretty short.
Yeah, no, legit. Like when I say I got fired, like I got pulled in one day. At the time, I was overseeing like 500 people. I just had a meeting, and I walked in. It was an HR meeting that I was supposed to be in.
Yeah.
Turns out it was for me, and I just got sat down, moneyballed, and like fired. Like,
how did they like? I've never been fired. Like, what is that? What's that like?
It was full blown moneyball. I look back, they did a great job. That's how you're supposed to handle it. Like,
yeah.
But I had a meeting, and we were actually going to be speaking to somebody else about an HR thing. So HR was in the room, which was the plan, right?
Yeah.
And, I won't go into names. There's no hard feelings around any of it. It was the best thing that could have happened to me at the time, quite frankly. But no, I walked in, they sat down, they said, hey, I know you were expecting so-and-so to join this meeting. That's actually not the plan. Effective immediately, we're actually separating ways with you. We have HR documents to run through with you and let you kind of know what a severance package looks like. I mean, it was just boom.
Dropped.
Dude, I couldn't have imagined, like, I've never been more blindsided about anything at the time, and on one end, there's a lot of things I wasn't super happy with. There's one of the relationships with one of the key players in the department, we were butting heads a little bit. And so I look back now and I'm like, it just makes perfect sense. They needed to do that. Things weren't going the way they needed to. But at the time it was a really wild experience.
Yeah. What was it like for you personally?
Well, I'd been Vivint's, one of their called poster child or top reps for every year I'd ever been there.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I always saw you on the leaderboard.
Yeah. It was top 1% every single year, consistent. It's not, I never even had a down year, and so to go from feeling like that to being fired was it was for sure like an ego hit, right? People are talking about it. And so emotionally on the inside.
So was there not an offer for you to like, hey, go back on the doors?
Oh, immediately. Of course. I got a call from every single person. Like,
right.
So what was weird about it is
because you're corporate.
First, I wasn't at Vivint, right? They called me and recruited me to go back to lead the department.
Yeah.
4 months in, they promoted me. They hired me for a position. 4 months later, promoted me. They had just paid money to relocate me too from Texas. So they hire me, promote me, relocate me, and fire me all in 9 months. And then within a day are trying to hire me back in every other department in the business, So it was like this, it's not like there was a fear of like, I lost my job. What am I going to do? I'd never, it was a W-2 role. I'd never even had a W-2 role.
Right.
And I was making less money than I did in a 1099 role. And I wasn't over knocking doors. This thing just popped up. So, I think it's a different experience than most have from like a loss of a job and fear of what am I going to do next. It was just an ego thing really, and trying to step out and realize how did that just happen? Like, I'm not the guy that gets fired. Like, that's not a thing. So there's an ego hit there. But honestly, I got a severance, which was the coolest thing ever. I'm like, a severance? What is that? I turned around and bought a house with it, like an investment property, and went to Hawaii for a month, So it wasn't like I can't really complain about anything. But it was a unique ego hit experience. One that, I had, leaving security was a big transition. And moving across the country to do a different industry. And then even though this was back to somewhere I was comfortable and familiar with, it was also a completely different sales model. Retail was different. And there was, you don't make moves like that unless you see a big long-term vision.
Right.
So I was bought into a long-term vision of such. So I think the biggest thing it does is, you're let down, you have an expectation, you have a hope, you have a vision, and that vision gets broke. And whether it was something that you just decided or you'd been there for a long time, when you have one vision and it changes, you're kind of left in that place of, now what's my purpose and now what next? And part of that
identity.
Yeah, it's an identity shift, and I had just gone through, I left security because I was already feeling like I needed a new identity, and solar helped me with that. And it was just a whole shift. And it really leads, to be honest, like the more I look at that, it leads a lot to the whole first question that got us here, which is, you brought up how you went through this drastic change of identity from both faith and work and this transition out of those. And I think those are two of the biggest identities in your life, like what your faith is, especially what you're raised as. If specifically if you're raised in a pretty high demand religion, it takes on a high percentage of your identity, I think, which it did me. And then being a sales guy, specifically working at Vivint in the roles I'd held and how I perceive my own ego and identity that was probably the biggest piece of my entire identity. So even though there was not really serious fear attached, heavy emotions of ego and what other people are thinking about you and saying about you, which in the past I'd never really felt that. I knew what people, for the most part, were saying, which was, usually it was filled with praise and things because I was a high producer and I got positive recognition. So to be all of a sudden put in a position where, you're wondering what other people are thinking or saying about you because you think there's a lot of negativity. It's probably the first time I felt like that feeling of like heavy, what are people thinking or saying? And that insecurity of my reputation has been shaken. Oh no. I remember feeling that. And after two big shifts of like leaving, that's kind of where I was like, I got to check out of this for a while. It was affecting me. So for the next 3.5 years, I went to California pretty much on a monthly basis to sell solar by myself in a hotel. Like I checked out and really slowed down and kind of paused and looked back on my whole career. Up to that point, I'd been.
So you were just like lone wolfing it.
Yeah, for like the next 3.5 years. Yeah, a lot of it also came because it's like, truth be told, I was a really shitty leader, dude. I wasn't like an asshole, but I was self-serving. The identity of being the top rep was so important to me, and I had become so heavily focused on that, and it was clear that none of my teams ever thrived.
Yeah.
They always did okay, but I never retained my people. I never had falling outs either. Like they just didn't stay or they moved on and worked with somebody else. I was so focused on going to be number one and try to be that guy and my own identity and reputation rather than helping everybody else.
That requires a high level of self-awareness on that piece. How did you come to that realization? Like, is there something that happened that kind of sparked this, or was it?
For sure. Multiple things. One is it really started happening in California. So after 10 years of this career of like really focusing on myself, being a high level, like individual producer, I knew what everybody thought about me. Great producer, terrible manager. You couldn't really argue it, right? Like my teams never grew past a certain. I could always recruit people because they wanted to follow the guy that was doing a lot of accounts and receive training, but not a lot of retention. And I think there's kind of another piece of self-awareness I come to, and then I'll explain kind of how I came to it. But the other piece is early on, like the first year of my career is when I go through some pretty traumatic personal stuff. And I lose a brother, sister, and a father in my first 3 years in the door-to-door space. And I look back now, I see it very different. Back then, I looked at it like, I'm going to keep going. Doesn't matter. I'm going to handle this. I'm going to still like achieve success no matter what I've gone through. And there's a pride behind that, which is actually a very positive thing. I learned to compartmentalize like my emotions at a very high level. And for that, like I give myself a pat on the back. Sometimes that is hard to do, but I also, it's kind of like your strength is your weakness taken too far, or opposite. Sorry, your weakness is your strength taken too far. So I see it as a strength that I compartmentalized, but I went so overboard. I really didn't. I think there's a lot of emotions I suppressed, and I used the job to do it.
Yeah. What am I, because I can resonate with that because my dad died in 2011.
Yeah.
And it was my rookie year.
Okay.
And
so super similar in that,
yeah,
in that case.
Looking back at it now as I've grown and done, interpersonal development work,
Yep.
I realized that I was burying my head in the sand at Vivint and working nonstop and being a Vivint guy, and
Right.
with the subconscious reasoning being I didn't want to deal or handle the grief of that loss and the sadness that came with that.
100%.
Right. And so looking back at it now, I'm grateful for the opportunity of the job. And the reason I can see why I was so successful is because it felt easier to go out and work and grind and recruit and knock doors than sit at home and actually feel the sadness
100%.
of the loss of someone you loved the most.
Yep. You described that perfectly. It's exactly what I was trying to convey as I was going into that. And that's what I did. I buried it on the doors with success and money and chasing that thing and the accolades. I mean, you've been there. When you perform at a high level in like a sales culture like this, you get so much praise, and so when you're having other issues going on in life and it's hard and there's a lot of emotions you're suppressing, that feel good that you get from like being praised in that way amongst all of your peers. And on top of it, you're receiving a reward financially at a way higher level than a lot of people your age are at that time. Like it causes such a level of like feel good and success. And what better way to replace all your pains and sorrows than with that, right? But ultimately it's such a surface level Band-Aid, and so
It's
there's
so short lived.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
But the it's crazy, like the hits you would get in the moment, it's a drug.
Every time you get a deal,
Yeah.
a sale, there's a hit. Every time,
Every time you're number one listed on the podcast as the top rep, like,
Yes.
It's like,
Yes. And I don't even want to speak about this like it's some negative thing. There's so much good in it. Like how many other ways could people sit at home, curl up in a ball, drink themselves or have some other addiction? If you're going to be addicted to success. But if somebody's listening to this that maybe has gone through something similar and is coping in the same way, there's a level of it and there's a balance. And if I would have known, I think so much of it is not even like, I chose, it was unconscious, right? I didn't know.
yeah.
Therapy, what's that?
Yeah.
I didn't go to therapy. I lost 3 family members and there was not even I don't think that ever even got brought up. Like, do you think you should see something? That wasn't brought up one time. It was the last thing I thought. I was like, what do you mean? I'm fine. I'm dominating in life. So like everything's great. So I think, just that unconscious, the way I was operating, and I really went into a mode for so long of that became my identity of like, nothing cracks me. You can't break, like that didn't even crack me type thing. And that really hurt me from a leadership standpoint, because at the end of the day, it's like leadership is just influence on others. And the only way you can truly influence somebody is if they believe and know that you actually care. And the only way they're going to know that is if you listen and understand what they're going through. You actually hear them and you can connect in a way where you can help them and support them. And I was so far removed from like the emotional connection with people. I could train them and tell them what to say and how to say it and go show them how to work hard and lead from the front. So I always felt like I was this great leader because I'm like, no, I'm doing the hard thing. I'm leading from the front.
Right.
But it's when you combine that with an emotional connection is when you can help. And the vision I took, or not the vision, but the route I took was I had no emotion. That switch had been shut off. So when somebody was struggling, let's say they broke up with their girlfriend, oh dude, I would have like laughed, not to their face like and been rude, but internally I would have been like,
yeah,
you're struggling to work today. Because you broke up with you. Pull your panties up and go to work, dude. What are you talking about? That's how I would have handled that situation, and not to fast forward too much, but with the change I've gone through now, so I've gone through a divorce, for example, like that for me was more emotionally difficult than the loss of family members for different reasons, right? They're just different events, but oh man, I look back on the people that needed emotional support and love from somebody they looked up to at the time as a leader. They got none of that from me.
Yeah.
So again, I wasn't like some horrible person as a leader. I was missing the most important part, and so to fast forward when you say where'd that awareness come from, I spent like 3.5 years, a lot of time sitting alone in hotels. I hesitate to say this because it's not something I promote, and I actually think it's, in most cases, it's a terrible solution for people. I shouldn't say terrible. It's just, I was always moving a million miles an hour, like to bury that, like from working so hard. And I thought everything about it, it's so funny, my old self, I thought I was handling everything in life like just such a champ, right? My ego was like, this is going back, like you can't break me. And I look back now and I'm like, I just never stopped. My brain never stopped. And there was no room to feel. I always was replacing it with some form of movement. And when I got out there, I had dealt with, for like 10 years of my life, like really serious back pain, and I'd been prescribed pills and gone through treatments over treatments. I had surgery and just a lot of like physical ailments. A lot of people started recommending marijuana when I was out in California, and it was legal, so kind of a different view of it, because it was legal, but also the religious boundaries I had grown up in, my upbringing, like, that's not even something I like thought about, looked at, about, considered. It felt wrong or bad,
right?
And then all of a sudden it got recommended to me so much by my customers because I couldn't sit down in chairs. My back hurt so bad, so I'd be standing at counters, and it always became a topic with, especially because I'd sell a lot of old people, right? And then we'd all. Sure. We'd build relationships off of all of our old people pains, even though I wasn't old. And anyways, I ended up, transitioning off any previous pain medications I'd ever used to using, medical cannabis. And it actually really helped me at the time from a medical pain standpoint. Oh, man. God, I don't have like a standout, like, oh, this is the first time exactly. I just remember two major things about it. Number one, it absolutely, for me at the time, actually did suppress pain in a similar way to what I'd previously used. And I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
I did a lot of research about it first. I wasn't just like, oh, let me start doing it. Yeah, no, I was very cautious. I was going to like my church leaders and like, hey, is this okay?
What was the input you're getting from them? Curious.
Actually totally fine with it.
Really?
Yeah. I was in total, what we would call good standing and that religious state because of the situation. And again, I think it was also my approach to it. Like I was like asking in advance, hey, if I were to do this, is this okay? And is this going to be looked upon in a certain way? I very much cared about, the responses. But it did something else to me outside of like help suppress pain. And it slowed my mind down. Mm. Like it slowed me down, like, in one way, something I hadn't ever experienced. In another way, like it felt like I needed it, but I was scared to death that it would affect me in a way where it affected my success and I'd become lazy and the things that still were very important to me that would be affected, and so I was very conscious that I'm like, this can never affect me if I use it like in that way. Like I have to be the guy that still knows how to produce and be who I was if this is going to be a thing. But long story short, like, it slowed me down in a way where I started to have emotions come up that I had not felt in a long, long time. I became more focused on people and relationships. I would have like more loving and forgiving thoughts than I'd have. Started to feel more empathetic. And I say, I'm not the one to like go recommend this to a bunch of people because I think for so many people, it's not a good answer. And I think for so many people, they wouldn't be able to maintain the level of what they need to, achieve success in areas of life that they need to. There's all sorts of problems it can cause too. So I don't like to be one that's like, here's a problem solved for you. Yeah. But the reality at the time is I needed to slow down a little bit, and I needed some awareness, and it gave it to me in a lot of ways.
It just seemed like it created some space. It's so interesting because marijuana is I have such an interesting relationship with it. I used to love it.
Same.
In a way to get to relax, like take the edge off, take an edible, watch a show. It's the best, right? Yep. And then I did ayahuasca in 2017. I went through my whole ayahuasca phase. And then when I started to smoke or take an edible after my ayahuasca experience, like my neurons have been repatterned, and I'll like be chilling, hanging out with the homies, got a pizza on the way, like just want to like relax on the weekend, and I'll take, a hit. and I go right back into like ayahuasca, deep trauma. And I'm just
Not
like,
where you need to be.
I'm just trying to chill.
It's not where you're at.
I'm just trying to chill. And so I don't work with marijuana at all anymore. It's probably been 5 years since I've even touched it. And then I'll try. I'm like, okay, it'll work this time. It'll be chill. And then it's just the last like 3 or 4 times, it just gets really intense. I'm like, I'm just trying to chill.
We've followed a soup for different reasons. Yeah. I haven't gone down the ayahuasca path. Actually, it's something that I still have considered in my mind. Maybe that time will come. But same thing. So I used it consistently for 5 years, very consistently on a daily basis. I actually had the most successful 5 years of my business career during that time. I would say there's a lot of benefits to where it made me more creative. Like creative
totally. It
juices.
does something with the neural pathways where like unlock something.
So I feel like it slowed me down in areas that needed, made me kind of a more empathetic person who was more focused on emotions and others. I had a lot of time, alone in hotel rooms thinking and reflecting back on the last 10, 15 years. I remember thinking very consciously at one point where I was like, if I died, it's like having experienced as much death as I had in my family, like I should have been contemplating this stuff a lot more, but I had suppressed it all. And now I'm thinking, if I were to die tomorrow, what would everybody say? I'd have a bunch of people show up and be like, he was such a good sales guy.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I'm like, that was such a core focus. I'm like, what else? Who's going to like say in what way I helped him outside of like, he taught me to sell. Like, I remember thinking that a lot. And so I in 2020, after about 3 years of going back and forth in 2020, I decided to kind of get back in the space. I'm like, I'm ready to actually go build teams again. And like, I want to be around people. I'd spent too much time alone. And after the time reflecting and looking back how I had operated and how I treated people, how I had or hadn't supported people, all the things, it was like, all right, this time I just want to do it all different. And that piece was just different. I added that piece in and it was like,
what did that look like?
If somebody was going through something, instead of pull your panties up and let's go and, power through, don't be a bitch. Instead of that mindset, it was, tell me what you're going through. And it was the recognition that everybody's hard is just as hard as yours. Because for so long, I had, quote unquote, been through so much. My life was harder than yours. So if I've been through something harder and I can still go do this, then pull your panties up and you can go do it too. You don't even talk to me about hard, dude.
Yeah.
That's the worst mentality you can possibly have, is to think that whatever you've been through is harder than somebody else. And the moment you do that, you block every connection, like so many connections and opportunities to help people because you think your hard's harder. Instead of recognizing each person's experience is different, whatever their hard is just as hard as yours at that time. It doesn't matter. And it's all different, And so I just started taking that perspective. Anytime somebody, if they weren't selling or producing, or if an event had happened I was aware of, right? I just wanted to learn more about what they were experiencing and empathize with them and talk through it and tell me more about it. And then it was like, I'm really, really sorry, man. Like, how can I help? Like a night and day approach, And
how was that received? Did you see like instant differences?
Yeah, dude. And instead it's like, I'd share times with them when I'd get more vulnerable and share, feelings I had rather than let me show you my tough guy ego and how I go do this when it's hard. It wasn't that. It was like, it's just a total, let's connect about what you're going through, because if I can connect, the tough guy part of me of like, let's go power through this shit, you can use that if you connect first. So if we connect and I care and I'm actually here to help, and the tough guy's actually not trying to be a dick. He wants to help you through it so you don't lay on the floor or turn to, drugs or alcohol or go get into some bad patterns. I actually wanted to help. I just didn't know I was skipping the whole part that allows you to help when you connect.
Sounds like, you're just building a foundation of trust.
Yeah. It's like, it changed everything.
Yeah. If you can build trust with someone, they'll run through a wall for you.
It changed everything. And from that side, then my career took off like it never had before. Like it was like all the experience I had now actually could be used.
And this is before Vital.
Yeah.
Cool. And where were you before Vital?
When I was I ran my own company for a bit, and then I joined up with Legacy, and we started that whole traveling Legacy X thing, the 1020.
I don't know what that is.
So after traveling for 3 years back and forth to California, I was making more money working alone for like 1 to 2 weeks by myself than I'd ever made running teams or working at Vivint. And That's why I didn't do anything else for 3 years.
Yeah.
It was like, this is actually great. Nobody's calling me. Nobody's bugging me. And I'm
Is this like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off type of thing?
yeah, 1 to 2 weeks,
Yeah.
a month. I would just go to California in a hotel by myself and sell. Every now and then a friend or two would come.
Yeah.
But after 3 years, I'm like, all right, this has been great. This has actually been the best part of my whole career. Like my balance, my work, my income, everything about this is great. But I miss people and I miss friends. Like
community.
I miss community. I want to be around people and I want some competition and like I want to have some more fun, but I'm like, but I feel like this model is so much better than summers. It's so much. So we kind of came up with this model where it was like, we're going to work for 10 days a month, take 20 days off. We're going to build a calendar out for the next year so we can actually recruit to this. And we're going to have competitions in these 10-day periods. And so we built out people have doing blitz models forever for sales. And we just put more structure, culture, competition, organization, SOPs, and a scalable platform together. I partnered up with Legacy, and in 18 months, we went from 3 to 300 people. I mean, it just exploded, took off. The next 2.5 years were a really great experience. With that business, they added a lot of value for me and their platform, and I think I did for them as well. And then the time came for, a variety of reasons to start Vital, and then that's kind of how that happened. But that 3 years is very, that's also right when I go through the religious transition too and kind of faith crisis. And so headed into that, when we started that, it was another period after having been fired and having an identity change a little bit, then having 3 years of a lot of alone time, a lot of reflection, a lot of kind of like awareness, awakening to my own egos and my own, walls I had built up and the way I was operating. Then also I kind of felt that heavy judgment of leaving, or transitioning out of the LDS church. Like there's just a lot of that judgment comes from yourself, it's not even other people. It's what you think other people are thinking about you in it. That's just as powerful, if not more, than what people might actually be thinking or saying, because most people really don't care and they're not thinking about you, right?
Yeah, I'm curious what sparked your spiritual change.
Yeah. It's hard to point to one thing, but I have this moment. I remember it was just kind of like a really deep, heavy internal thought of like math. I was just sitting and thinking one night, and I'm like, if there's, and this doesn't really have to do with the Mormon church. This has to do with any religious sect in any way, right? Like if 0.0001% of a population is the only ones that are a part of this organization, and there's 7 billion people, like it's just, why and what sense does that, really make? So it was just kind of thought around that, and like just a heavy love for people everywhere that I just don't think that 99.999% are going to be judged off this information over here that they didn't have, and the 1% or less than 1%, the people that did have that information are the ones that have to give it to the other. Like it was just kind of more of a theological, just thought in general that just kind of hit me. That's like, I don't think this just adds up for me. Something's feeling off. And then that led to me diving in and doing a little bit more digging and research on things with the history of that religion, which just then led to a lot of information and answers of things that I viewed a lot differently than I previously had. So
yeah, I can relate to that too. And one thing that I have a hard time with, not a hard time, but I get it, is I have no spite with the church. I think the church is great. I love the church. Yeah. My mom works for the church, and I do feel really inclined to share like a message that like you can leave Mormonism and still have a beautiful relationship with God and the universe and the divine, and that there's no friction point on that. And that's one thing I see in you as well. It's sad to see when people leave the church and then go really anti. And it just brings a lot of negative energy. And it's just like you can live a life where the church works with your life, and you don't have to be Mormon, especially here in Utah. And so, I'm curious, how did your personal relationships change, if at all, when you decided to leave Mormonism?
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes down to the who. Luckily those that, I have the closest and most important relationships with, like especially my family, like my mom, my sister, who are both still very, very much, in the church. My mom's temple worker multiple times a week. Honestly, it's been amazing. They were extremely good about it. A lot of questions, definitely a few hard conversations, definitely some disagreements, still to this day on certain things and topics. But overall, as far as just like life direction, acceptance, like unconditional love, I have felt that so strong. And so that, luckily, I've definitely had experiences outside of that where it's been something very different, where, either kids have been treated differently or myself for one reason or another. And the truth is I try not to take that serious, because from my end, like, I was in that exact same boat, and I actually would have thought or made judgments accordingly in the exact same way. So even if somebody maybe has or hasn't, I don't take too much in it personally, because I probably did that to people without even knowing, and so just like you, I think there is a world where, are there things that cause me to want to bring up and address, and I'm somebody who likes to be passionately persuasive. So if we get into a conversation, I may have heavy opinions on it, but ultimately I think every single religion out there, even though I don't subscribe to one, I think they're all trying to do one thing, truthfully, and it's provide hope. That's it. At the end of the day, it's hope for something better after this life, right? And some of them have more strict guidelines or boundaries or, asks of you to be a part of that organization if you want to, access whatever hopeful thing that they present to you. But like my mom's a great example, right? Like, she lost 2 children and a husband in a 3-year period. And that would just completely destroy some people. And if you were to speak to her, she's going to point to the hope that she has due to her religious beliefs. And for me, it's like, okay, if that's what gives you the hope to survive and to move forward every day and to remain a good person and do your best every single day and not enter a state of depression or hopelessness or fear or, all the directions you could go. If that's what gives it to you, I love everything about that. The only thing I would say is I think so many people enter a place where, whether it's because that's how they were raised or that's just what they've chose, I think so many people enter a place where they choose to believe it's the only location for hope. And so if that's where somebody finds it, I love everything about it. But I also think there's a window that I wish would be open more for people to realize that there's just as much hope without somebody creating a specific set of boundaries and rules. That's how I believe anyways. And my experience is not that I lost hope of what the future is or the future after this life, after having gone outside those boundaries. For me, I feel like it's just gotten bigger and greater, and it's opened up like a world of possibilities where I get to decide what those hopeful things are. And I love that because they come from me internally. But so I think there's a time and a place. So I think sometimes people couldn't pull that out of them. I think there's times where people could not pull out a hope greater than what an organization could from themselves. And so if that's what they need at the time, is to align with an organization that gives them hope and a community that has similar hopes and lifts them up, then I'm all in support. I love everything about it. Sometimes it just gets so strong that it can have negative effects elsewhere.
And I love the parallels here, brother, because it sounds like that's what you guys are doing at Vital, is providing hope for young sales reps.
Yeah, I mean, on the work side, I think, because I think that principle applies everywhere, does it not?
Right. And I think, from where you've been in your experience of change, career, relationship, faith, and then to have gone through those experiences, now for you to be able to provide a new company, a new structure, a new opportunity for people in the space, I mean, you're doing it in a completely different way. And let me ask this, what do you hope your impact, how it looks different today versus what it was in the past?
Oh, yeah, shoot, man. In the past, it would have all been about, again, so much of it was self-focused because of what I was trying to accomplish. But even if I got outside of that, if I was leading a team of individuals, right, all I would have been thinking about is what's this team going to do and what are the numbers going to be that we go do and what's our ranking going to be and what's our performance going to be and what do we all get out of that and what do you make and what do I make and not that we weren't having fun along the way and we didn't have authentic relationships. We did. God, I look at everything just a 1,000,000% different from a different lens now. Today it's like we happen to be doing this thing that is selling stuff. And in this case, we sell solar, and I'm grateful for it because I love this direction of direct-based sales and the amount of personal development. And, I think selling is an art that's just incredible in so many ways, from how you learn to communicate with others. And truly, if you become good at it, it's because you've learned to listen and you've learned to understand what people's needs are. You've learned to provide solutions and value and help people. And that's what the best salespeople learn. So I love training and all that aspect. But at the end of the day, that's not really what we are. That's a piece of what we are. If you look at any major business, I think that's done great, especially in the direct sales organization, they're in the business of personal development.
Totally.
It's talent acquisition and personal development. So how many people out there need help personally, on an individual level? And in today's day and age, I feel like maybe it's because I'm more aware, or maybe it's because the world's gone through some wild things since COVID. And I feel like so many people are missing. That's the wrong word. I feel like so many people are just going through so much. And more than ever, I feel like people need support, help to get out of whatever mental funk they're in or whatever difficult situation they've been in. And now that I feel like I'm better at connecting with people in that area, that's really it. I'm like, how many people can we just help think better? How many people can we provide a hope, whether it's financially or just financially that's just what happens when you're operating.
It's a byproduct.
It's a byproduct.
Yeah.
How many people can I help think better, think more positive? How do you provide people with hope when you're not even referring to a religious place of hope for the future and manifesting a better life and making good decisions and being honest and let's teach a lot of really good life principles and how to think better for the future. And if you can just help people do that, to your point, the money is a byproduct. It comes after.
Yeah, and I love what you said. I mean, it's the reason I love this industry so much, and I haven't technically left the industry and I'm in a supporting role, is just door to door is the ultimate vessel of personal development. It will expose you. You cannot hide in door to door. Whatever frustrations, whatever traumas, whatever mindset issues you have, whatever self-limiting beliefs you have, right? The doors will expose it at the deepest core. And this, this is such an incredible tool to navigate interpersonal development, strength, mindset, emotional capacity, spiritual connection. And, if you do it, and if you learn to do it in a very, authentic way, it also provides this immense financial opportunity. And so that's why I just love the doors. It's just so much more than the money.
One thing that I think is so cool with what you're the whole movement that you're running, right? I think it's because we recognize the strength in it, right? We both had the ability to go make a lot of money at a young age, and we saw these positive byproducts. But I think the other thing, and this is no hit on any previous company, any previous leaders, anything. Our whole industry was so male dominated, so ego, money driven, recruit your friend, dollar over, there's so much of that. And a lot of industries have it, but the door-to-door industry, when specifically if you've been a part of it, it's pretty ruthless. And the term or the phrase I use a lot is I call it sales trauma.
Totally, it's a thing.
If you've been in this space, you've been hurt, burned, at some point.
Lied to, deceived.
The longer you're in it, the more it's going to happen. As a rep, you get hurt on a daily basis because of the amount of rejection you face, right? You're going to deal with loss. You're going to have cancels that you have to learn how to emotionally deal with a cancel. And that's such a base level of something that seems basic. But then you move into a manager position. All right, now it's not about your customers. It's about your reps, and these are your friends. So now when you lose them, not taking it personal and not thinking that people leave you. And then this whole thing of people leave me, I'm not good enough. I think that's such a, part of the male psyche in general in our world anyways, of I'm not good enough, and the desire to, prove that to everybody.
Yeah. I just had a memory flashback in my head. I'll never forget. It was my rookie year, 2011, out in Dallas, Fort Worth. And before the doors, I feel like I was very well liked. I was well liked in high school. I was the fun kid. I was kind of like into shenanigans. I was really, really playful. I feel like I was always in a good mood. I could kind of show up to parties and make friends with everyone. And I just feel like I was overall well liked. Then I remember like in my first 2 weeks at the doors, like people being abrasive with me and like slamming the door in my face and like kind of being mean.
Experience.
And I'm like, I have never not had people like me. Like, what is going on? And it was really hard to get over. I remember it was the hardest part of the job was it's the first time in my life I've never not been liked.
I remember specifically when I'd be recruiting, being concerned to recruit who you actually thought was probably the best recruit, which is the popular kid.
Yeah.
The one that looks like they have the highest self-esteem and they're social and they're talking, because they're like, so many people would be like, oh, you should recruit them. They're going to be amazing. And in my mind, I'm thinking on the surface, but exactly what you just said, if they've been accepted always, everybody likes them all the time, they are emotionally about to go through something they've never experienced. And you just said it. And it's so from a rep to then a manager who loses people, you move up into a regional position. Oh, you don't lose people. You lose an entire manager at once. You get up to a VP level, you risk losing regions at once. You could lose 100 people at a time if something happened. And I've had that happen, and that like the learning to get there. And so I think there's just so much of that. Anyways, the whole point I was bringing this up is when I look at your movement, dude, and the way you've tried to integrate, self-development in a different way. It's not just let's self-develop and let's sell more. It's let's personally find a higher level of balance with spirituality, and whether that isn't attaching religion as much or whether it is, regardless, it doesn't matter. You're integrating things like meditation and breath work, and you're teaching people to not suppress their emotions, but to talk about them. It's vulnerability. These are the things that actually our industry was missing for, I think, quite a long time by the fault of no one, right? Like society has shifted in a lot of ways. Our industry has absolutely morphed and matured over time. And after having so many people go through, I think, some pretty serious emotional trauma because of how this industry is, I think it's morphed to where now there's people that have been through it who are becoming more aware. They're like, how do we help these young guys that are in their 20s now, that are in the middle of going through it, that they're about to, how do we actually help them avoid the mistakes we made? Because when we started, nobody had been doing it 20 years. Nobody had gone through it to that level to where they could turn around and coach to that level, And so what you're doing right now to turn around and actually start pointing those things out and coaching people, and the guys that are in the space that have now been doing it 20 years, that have become more, the Sam Taggarts of the world, like Sam's doing a great job of this. They're not just taking a let's teach sales angle. They're coming at it from a lot of different ways that I think our industry is needed. And it's opened it up to a much more emotionally safe place than I think it previously was. And I think the companies who adopt a culture more similar to that are the ones that are winning at a higher level.
And I think that's why you guys are seeing success, right? So thank you for that compliment. Yeah, it's definitely something I'm trying to bring to the space of just like emotional regulation and just how do we live healthier, happier lives while doing such a difficult, intense job that is going to require high levels of focus and attention and movement. So, I mean, it's a lot to go through. And so there needs to be tools to support that. And I think that's one thing that I resonate with Vital so much is that it feels like you guys have a lot of soul.
We're trying, man. I feel like I was missing that for so long. And so, soul, culture, creativity, whatever it is, trying to insert that as much as possible and keep the integrity of it. The more you grow, the more difficult it gets, right? Like when it's a smaller group, it's kind of easier. And so that's a challenge as it continues to change.
How many years are you guys going in now? It's your third?
Yeah.
Third year.
Yeah,
right?
Third year. Yep.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing on a growth level?
Yeah, that's a great question. This year's been a really interesting one. We've onboarded in the last 10 months, we've onboarded about a little over 3,000 people. And it's really weird because it's more people in the last year than I've recruited in 20 years combined. Right. So there is this movement happening. There is this momentum. One of them is retention. bringing that many people. I mean, we're in door-to-door world, so it's a constant cycle. You're never going to, people hear that. They're going to be like, yeah, how many are still active? It's like 1,000, man. Yeah, we've probably had 2,000 come and go or never even start or not have a great experience. Like, that's a part of the game, when you build and grow that fast, so making sure we give them the proper support out of the gate and that they don't just show up as a number. So lots of online training, support, and systems for scale and that allow us to duplicate. I'd say those are things, but also, navigating it in a market where there is so much change. Building a system to support that many people while navigating a lot of crazy change, like that's all a lot, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you've recognized this too, but especially in my business, I've realized that I can only take my business as deep as I've taken myself. And every time I have a big personal development breakthrough or I go do a big personal development weekend or really like focus on the things that I feel like might be stopping me, there always seems to be a correlation of my business goes to that next level too. And so it's like kind of this constant, almost pressure I put on myself of like, I can't ever stop developing myself because if I do, my business is gonna die.
I love that. No, I think you're dead on. I think it's one thing that's kind of interesting too. The bigger you get, right? There's so many different problems you face. So I feel like the last question you asked me, I didn't do the greatest job because it's like, which one do I pick?
Right.
I feel like I kept it simple rather than rambling on, which is probably good because I tend to do that. But I think the bigger you get, sometimes you question whether your personal development actually matters anymore. So it's like both. Like you just nailed it on the head of like, you stop developing, your business does. So I totally agree. But I've also been through a weird ebb and flow to where it's like, yeah, but it's like I'm not the guy anymore. Like I am the guy, but I'm not the guy, right? Like there's the sales reps are the guys. They're the ones getting it done. And there's a manager that's the guy. And there's a regional that's the guy. There's a VP. They're like, those are all the guys. Like at the end of the day, like, is my development really that big of a deal? But it's interesting you say that because I look back and I had our second year in business, a lot of different things happened for a lot of reasons. So it's a loaded statement to make, but I was stuck in some ways. There was a lot of things that caused me to be what I would just refer to as stuck.
Yeah.
And I wasn't making certain changes I needed to make, that I knew it, and I was starting to feel it. I wasn't making certain decisions. They were more fear-based. If I make this decision, what will happen? The what ifs. And I remember I actually I started feeling so paralyzed by where I was at and fear of making certain decisions and making the wrong one because I am the one in charge now. And like so many people depend on making sure I make the right decision. I was paralyzed, and I actually had energy work done. And Julie, I called Julie, and I was like, I had never specifically said I want to go like have energy like work done in that way. Done, anyways. So I went and had this energy work done, and it was wild. First of all, I also had some pain I was dealing with. Didn't tell her where. Showed up, and she's like, well, besides taking care of this, what else do we got to do? And just called it out.
Yeah.
I even told her what I was there for. That was a wild thing. Then I laid down. Does this energy working right out of the start. She literally just goes, wow, what are you scared of? I can feel the fear.
Wow.
And like, this is such a constant moment for me. I know exactly when it was, like where, like, and I know exactly, there was like 3 major fear points. I didn't even like, it was clear. And I'm like, this, and this. And I sat and talked while she was doing this work. And I got done. And before I got done, she said, you have to pick one right now and deal with that. Like I'd become pretty overwhelmed with kind of the next step. Just too many things, right? Like, and I think that happens to a lot of people at different times, at different roles of like, you get overwhelmed. Your nervous system starts to shut down. You start to operate off fear. You're operating off such a low frequency. And I think that's really where I would go to. So much of it is about energy, especially as you get bigger, because you're the one responsible for vision. You are responsible for vision. Yeah, you may not be the one motivating the guys in the meeting and doing a cheer and giving a training anymore. But those reps stop if that manager has no vision to tell them why they should keep
You're
going.
steering the ship, brother.
Yeah, and if they didn't get a message from their regional, from their VP who had vision to pump them up, not right today, but where we're going in 5 years. And if they don't feel the energy from you, you can give a fake vision anyway. You can say some words, but if they don't feel the conviction that you believe it and you're going there, and if they don't believe you can actually take them there, you're going to lose. And again, once you're in a bigger position, your losses aren't small. You don't lose a rep or two. Yeah. You lose teams and regions, and you can't sleep at night because the overwhelm of thought of losing a team or a region, or like it becomes heavy, right? So I remember experiencing that overwhelm, and there's some decisions I need to make, and walked out of that room, and there was multiple things. I was like, okay, I'm done. And within 2 months, I made some really difficult decisions, got it done, got it out of the way, and literally it has just skyrocketed. Part of those decisions were not just some really hard ones I had to make, but were also very conscious decisions of things I'd been putting off. One of them being completely stop using marijuana at all, to your point. Yeah. I went from having a relationship where I feel like time and a place, there were certain things that helped me. And it got to a place where it actually started, the more I had on my plate and some big changes I went through in life, it would cause me more to ruminate on those things and focus on them. Yeah. And it became more of an anxiety-ridden, but I found myself still doing it. And it took a minute to make the decision of like, what are you doing? You actually know, like your body's already told you it doesn't need this anymore. Some of the things that helped you with, you don't need anymore. And totally stopped that, made some very key decisions, and it was just
take off
mode, and everything's changed both personally, professionally. And it really is like you just could not have hit it more on the head. Like your personal development determines as a leader everything that's happening under you. And the moment you start to think maybe it doesn't is the moment you're on a downhill trend. Yeah. Like you're either about to get stuck or drop off a cliff if you don't recognize that.
Yeah, right on the money, man. So, and with that being said, brother, what do you hope 2025 brings you?
Oh man, that's a good question. Like I got a lot of excitement and energy towards it. So I'm really looking forward to 2025. 2024 was such a breakout. Like what I just said, that's kind of what the beginning was some big decisions that had to be made. And then it's led to where it's at. Continued momentum, growth, excitement, but it's also fun to enter this year on that note. Like the fear, like I just don't have any anymore. I couldn't care less. Like I'm kind of in this place where like I've hit I don't give a shit mode in such a big way that
you're just gonna send it.
Yeah, because I don't like. So I'm just here. I'm here. Yeah. I'm here for that. I'm here to just like go really build on the momentum and just have fun.
Yeah, man.
So like I'm really excited, but also I've never had so many problems ever, and that's like a weird experience, right? Like because we've grown so much, it's like you never don't have. There's not a day.
There'll never be a time in our lives where we have no problems.
The only thing that hits me too are all the problems from so many people. So
you just get better at handling your problems.
That's it.
I've realized.
Yeah,
problems kind of like you just get better at handling them.
Yeah. What else do you have?
Yeah.
What else are you going to bring? There's been so much change from personal, things and work that it's. Yeah, I'm just kind of here for it now.
Yeah,
it's exciting. It's fun.
Well, I love what you're doing at Vital, man. I love the soul you bring. It's been fun kind of following your journey. I'm stoked for you, brother, and thanks for coming on the pod, man. So much love.
Yeah, man. God, that goes by quick. Yeah. I feel like I could sit and chat with you for a minute.
We'll fire up another one.
What do we do? What else do we need to
go
into?
Part 2 coming soon.
Like so much more outside of the work zone.
Yeah.
I appreciate those parts of the conversation. That's fun, dude.
Big love, man.
I appreciate you having me on. For real. I love what you're doing in the space and outside the space from a work standpoint. Very cool.
Thank you, brother.
So
cool. Nice job, man.
That's a wrap.
You rip. That was you're so easy to talk to.
That was fun, dude.
One of the easiest ones I've ever done.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, bro.
Like, for real. It's
inspired by your story. Thanks for getting vulnerable and sharing. And
there's so many things overcoming
some trials, and it's cool, man. It's cool what you're doing. And I know all the guys I work with in Alchemy, they're Vital. Love